Hey everyone, Rob Ryder again. More on canon law. We're going to look at the penal code, canon law style. And we're going to use for the source material is the Code of Canon Law from 1983. And today is the 26th of September, 2012. So just real quick, here's the Code of Canon Law, 1983. We're not going to read out of this, but I just want you to see the whole code only has 246 pages. That's all the law there is in the church. There's IRS manuals that are that long, right? So all the laws of the church can be found in 246 pages. Now, a lot of people think of the church just for marriages and so forth, annulments, and I don't know what they think about the church for, but they spend a lot of time talking about sanctions in the church, offenses and punishments in general. So this is out of book 6. And so we're going to go through the highlights on this, and I'll try to keep it less than an hour. So here we go. Part 1, offenses and punishments in general. The punishments of offenses in general, Title 1. Canon 1311. The church has its own inherent right to constrain with penal sanctions Christ's faithful who commit offenses. Anybody who's been baptized into the universal church of Jesus Christ is one of the faithful, and the church has jurisdiction to constrain them with penal sanctions if they commit offenses. It's just not me and you. It's the cop that stopped you. It's the judge sitting on the bench. It's the clerk of the court who's working for the church. She really has something to worry about. It's the attorney sitting next to you, right? Church isn't saying they have any jurisdiction over anybody but Christ's faithful, and they define Christ's faithful as anybody who's been baptized. So that takes care of a third of the world. But anybody who does a contract and puts it under the seal of a notary also has given the court jurisdiction. The Universal Church of Jesus Christ just got jurisdiction, the one court of justice. Powerful stuff. So they got different kinds of, penal sanctions. You got medicinal, expiatory. The law may determine that an expiatory penalties, which deprive a member of Christ's faithful or some spiritual or temporal good, and are consistent with the church's supernatural purpose. Supernatural purpose. So, let me see. The act of making satisfaction or atonement for any crime or fault, the extinguishing of guilt by suffering or penalty. Those are what expiatory penalties are. It's like expatriation. Expiatory. Use is also made of penal remedies and penances. The former primarily to prevent offenses. So that's what penal remedies are. And the later to substitute for and augment a penalty. And that's what the penances are. So they can give you what the crime says, and they can also throw a penance on top of it. Penal law and penal precept. If a law is changed after an offense is committed, the law more favorable to the offender is applied. Okay, so they go to the least constrictive law. If a later law removes a law, or at least a penalty, the penalty immediately lapses. That makes sense. 1314. A penalty is of the most part ferende sentite, which means sentence to be passed, not binding upon the offender until it's been imposed, right? So they got to take you to court, find you guilty, they can impose a sentence. That's what that type is. A sentence to be passed. If, however, a lete sentente, which is a sentence already passed, so that it is incurred automatically upon the commission of the offense, if the law or precept expressly lays that down. Okay, so you can already be guilty and be sentenced just by doing the act. Whoever has legislative power can also make penal laws. A legislator can, however, by laws of his own, reinforce with a fitting penalty a divine law or an ecclesiastic law of a higher authority. So whoever has legislative power, well, one person that has it is the bishop. The bishop has legislative, executive, and judicial power. There is no separations of power. He has them all. He may delegate those powers to others, but he holds all the powers: legislative, executive, and judicial. Law can either itself determine a penalty or leave its determination to a prudent decision of a judge. Now the judge again, right? The judge of first instance is normally the bishop. However, he may delegate that authority to a guy called the judicial vicar. And the executive authority he may give to the vicar general. So the vicar general is the executor of the sentence handed down by the judicial vicar. A particular law can also add other penalties to those laid down for certain offense in a universal law. That is, this is not to be done, however, except in the gravest necessity. Okay, so they can really stick it to you if they want to. Well, you better be, if you're one of Christ's faithful, you better not be breaking any of God's laws. Better not be charging your brother, bearing false witness, lying, stealing, cheating, taking God's name in vain, adulterating my God-given character. Diocesan bishops who are to take care that as far as possible any penalties which are imposed by law are uniform within the same city or region. So it's like, he's over all the laws and all the penalties within his jurisdiction. Penalties are to be established only so far as it really necessary for the better maintenance of ecclesiastic discipline. Dismissal from a clerical state, however, cannot be laid down by a particular law. So they can dismiss people from a clerical state. Well, who's a cleric? Well, could it be the judge is a cleric? Could it be the clerk's a cleric? Could it be there's people working in those offices that are clerics? They don't actually come out and sit in the courtroom. Could be lots of clerics. A legislator is not to threaten. Whenever you say late sentente, I'm just going to say excommunication, because that's one of them. A legislator cannot threaten excommunication penalties except perhaps for outstanding malicious offenses, which may be either more grave by reason of scandal. They cannot be effectively punished by after the fact penalties. And so automatic, right? That's what those are. Incurred at the moment of committing the offense for which the canon imposes that penalty. Okay, so there's certain ones that have that penalty. You do that, boom. One of them is excommunication, excuse me. And according to St. Thomas, scandal is a word or action evil in itself, right? So you better not be bringing scandal. To the extent to which a legislator can impose precepts by virtue of the power of governance in the external forum, and the external forum is when it's not just a church matter. This is, dealing with the civil, with the world. To that extent, can he also, by precept, threaten a determined penalty other than perpetual expiatory penalty? To that extent, can he also to the extent that to which a legislator can impose precepts by virtue of the power of governance in the external forms. And so since he can impose the prescripts into the external form, like in a contract between two lay people, to that extent can he also by precept threaten a determined penalty other than perpetual expiatory penalty. So he can pretty much do everything with you up into a perpetual one, which would be, everlasting. So he can't take your soul forever if you guys are all worshipers, right? He can just, you're the one that's going to suffer, not necessarily your bloodline. And that's yet to be seen. Okay. A precept to which a penalty is attached is not to be issued unless the matters have been very carefully considered and unless provisions of particular laws have been observed. And a precept is a commandment or direction given as a rule. Okay, so it's not to be issued unless the matter can be very carefully, it's been very carefully considered. They're going to give you plenty of chances to do the right thing. You and them. You're going to do the right thing by taking it in and doing the petition properly, bringing the evidence in, right? And as long as whoever they are do the right thing and compensate you, everybody gets to go home. They don't, they have a problem. There's a guy called the Vicar General that will come and enforce the order. Those who are liable to penal sanctions. No one can be punished for a commission of an external violation of a law or precept unless it is gravely imputed by reason of malice or culpability. Okay? So, no one can be punished for the commission of an external violation of the law or precept unless gravely imputable by reason of malice or culpability. Right? So, guilt or blame that is deserved, and a legal term describing the intent to harm. Otherwise, you can't be charged with a crime. Now remember, ecclesiastic courts are the ones that have exclusive jurisdiction over issues of faith and sin. And when you understand in these civil courts we go into, when they say that you've put in a false document, they're saying you committed perjury. Perjury is a ecclesiastic offense. Civil court has no jurisdiction in perjury. Yet that's what they're charging you with, putting in a false document. A person whose delivery violated a law or precept is bound by a penalty prescribed to that law or precept. If, however, the violation was due to an omission of due diligence, the person is not punished unless the law or precept provides otherwise. There's all sorts of ways, to get forgiveness for things that we've done. Not that we've done anything to the church by their laws, but they're saying that we have. They're judging us. They, being the civil court, is using pagan Roman law, which when Rome, was the ruler of all the known world, any place they went, they just adopted the customs of the place, and that's how court was held. Right? So they didn't impose their laws on you. If you were a member of a society, well, then they imposed your laws on you. And so these courts are imposing our laws on us because we're Christians. So they're going to go to this book and say, well, you just committed, as far as we're concerned, you just committed heresy. Looks like you did, right? You lied on this piece of paper. It's a false document. Although nobody's given any evidence to say that it is. Just because they say it is, it is. Where there's been an external violation, imputability is presumed unless it appears otherwise. Imputed, as to use a legal phrase, this word means attributed vicariously. That is an act, fact, quality that is imputed to a person when it is ascribed or charged to him, not because he is personally cognizant of it or responsible for it, but because another person is, over whom he has control, or for whose acts or knowledge he is responsible. Notice to agents, notice to principal. If a cop stops you, his boss just got in trouble. You take it in ecclesiastic court, right? Because the guy shouldn't be stopping you if he understood the law. Well, who didn't teach him the law? His boss. Notice to agents, notice to principal. Those who habitually lack the use of reason, even though they appear sane, when they violate a law or precept, are deemed incapable of committing an offense. No one is liable to a penalty who, when violating a law or precept, has not completed his 16th year of age, was without fault, ignorant of violating a law or precept. Inadvertence and error are equivalent to ignorance. So where they say ignorance is no excuse, in the civil courts, in these courts, ignorance is an excuse. No one is liable to a penalty without fault, ignorant of violating the law. I didn't know there was such a law. Please show me the canon law. If it isn't there, it doesn't exist. Acted under physical force or under impetus of chance occurred, which the person could not foresee or, if foreseen, could not avoid. Acted under physical force. You were forced into it. Acted under compulsion of grave fear, even if only relative. You signed the damn form because if you didn't, they're going to come anyways. So we do the IRS forms. The act is intrinsically evil if it tends to be harmful to souls. Well, there's nothing you've done that's harmed anyone. Period. If you haven't harmed your brother, then you haven't harmed anyone. The perpetrator violation is not exempted from penalty, but the penalty prescribed in the law or precept must be diminished or a penance substituted in its place if the offense was committed by. And then this is really the same ones as above, right? Minors under 16, imperfect use of reason, lacking the use of reason because culpable drunkenness, because you were drunk when it happened. There's all sorts of things that would keep you. A perpetrator violation is not exempted from penalty, but the penalty prescribed by law or prescribed is diminished if these things have happened, right? They're not going to throw the book at you. Canon 1326. A judge may inflict a more serious punishment than prescribed in the law or precept when a person, after being condemned or after penalty has been declared, continues to offend, that obstinate ill will may prudently be conducted from other circumstances. A person who establishes in some position or dignity, or who is established in some position of dignity, or who has abused a position of authority or an office in order to commit a crime. The judge may inflict more serious punishments than prescribed by law if somebody has abused the position of authority or an office in order to commit a crime. It's what they're doing. An offender who, after a penalty for a culpable offense was constituted, foresaw the event but nevertheless omitted to take precautions to avoid it, which any careful person would have taken. That would be like the clerk of the court sitting in there who knows what's going on, right? There's lots of offenders in those courtrooms who know what's going on. We don't need to pick them out. The church will take care of it. We just need to bring it to their attention. In the cases mentioned in 1, if the penalty has constituted a excommunication, another penalty or penance may be added. We're going to pile it on. A particular law may be either general rule or for an individual offense, determine, excusing, attenuating, or aggravating circumstances of which the case mentioned in canon, whatever. Basically, the court has a lot of leeway as far as the sentence they're going to give. If the acts or omissions of their nature lead to the carrying out of the offense, the person responsible may be subjected to a penance or to a penal remedy unless he or she had spontaneously desisted from the offense which had been initiated. However, if scandal or other serious harm or danger has resulted, the perpetrator, even though spontaneously desisting, may be punished by just penalty, but of a lesser kind than determined by the completed crime. Where a number of persons conspire together to commit an offense and accomplices are not expressly mentioned in the law or precept, if after the fact sentencing penalties were constituted for the principal offender, then the others are subject to the same penalties or to the penalties of the same or lesser gravity. So again, everybody in the courtroom, if you work in a court building, if you're a county official, you better pay attention. This is Nuremberg, brother, and saying you're just following orders isn't going to make it. In the case of excommunication penalty attached to an office, accomplices, even though not mentioned in law or precept, incur the same penalty. If you're going to excommunicate one, they're all getting excommunicated. Now this canon here is so important, Canon 1330. An offense which consists of a declaration or in some other manifestation of doctrine or knowledge is not regarded as affected if no one actually perceives the declaration or manifestation. You need to point it out. it needs to be pointed out to the church. Right? If you want that piece of paper to be an offense where they're trying to drag you into a court and it hasn't been before a justice, but it is under the seal of a clerk, which just gave the court, the ecclesiastic court jurisdiction, you need to take it to them and show it to them. Penalties and other punishments. Censures. An excommunicated person is forbidden to exercise any ecclesiastic offices, ministries, functions, or acts of governance. You can't act as a governor if you're excommunicated. Legislature, Senate, House of Lords, House of Commons. Whatever house you're in, you're going to lose your ability to govern. If excommunication has been imposed or declared, the offender invalidly exercises any acts of governance which, in accordance with something or other, are unlawful. Okay, so if they're excommunicated and they do any more, it's unlawful. Enough said. Loses the title to benefits of any dignity, office, functions, or pension held in the church. You get excommunicated, you walk out the door with a pole over your frickin' shoulder with all your belongings hanging on the end. You're going to be banished from the kingdom. And the one ecclesiastic court, the Universal Church of Jesus Christ, its court has jurisdiction over the entire world. A suspension prohibiting receipts of benefits, stipends, pensions, or other things carries with it an obligation of restitution of whatever has been unlawfully received, even though it was in good faith. Boy. That's how you get your stuff back. You get the law on your side and equity will follow. A law but not a prescript can establish a excommunication suspension without added determination or limitation. Expiatory penalties, the means of which atonement or reparation is made. Atonement or reparation. Well, so these are the ones we may normally see. Expiatory penalties can affect the offender either forever or for a determinable or indeterminable period. Apart from others, which the law may perhaps establish, these penalties are as follows. Deprivation of power, office, function, right, privilege, faculty, favor, title, insignia, even of a merely honorary nature. They're going to strip you of all of them little medals you got. A penal transfer to another office. Your ass is going to the Aleutian Islands. Dismissal from the clerical state. Ooh, that's bad. Clerk of the court. Better watch it. Only those expiatory penalties that may be like excommunicated, which are enumerated. Okay. So, an order imposing residence in a certain place. Yeah, we're going to give you a certain place. It's cell number 13. That's where your residence is now. Penal remedies and penances. When someone is in a proximate occasion of committing an offense, or when after investigation there is serious suspicion that an offense has been committed, the ordinary, either personally or through another, can give the person a warning. The fact that there has been a warning or correction must always be proven, at least from the point of a document to be kept in the secret archive of the Curia. 3 strikes, you're out. Penance, which is imposed in the external form, is the performance of some work of religion or piety or charity. A public penance is never imposed for occult transgressions. You're going to get yours in private. Owl worshiper. Application of penalties. Abstain from imposing penalty or substitute minor penalty or a penance if the offender has repented and repaired the scandal, or if the offender has been or foreseeably will be sufficiently punished by the civil authority. The church may let the civil authority do their dirty work, whoever they are. Could be the vicar general. He's representing common law. Whenever an offender had only an imperfect use of reason or committed the offense out of fear or necessity or in the heat of passion or in a mild or with the mind disturbed by drunkenness or similar causes, the judge can refrain from inflicting any punishment if he considers that person's reform may be better accomplished in some other way. A censure cannot validly be imposed unless the offender has beforehand received at least one warning to purge the contempt. Sorry about that. Phone's always ringing when I'm doing this. So you get at least one warning. The offender is said to have purged the contempt if he or she truly repented of the offense and has made, or at least seriously promised to make, reparation for damage and scandal. When a person has been found out guilty of an accusation, 1348, Canon 1348, remember this one. When a person has been found out guilty of an accusation, or where no penalty has been imposed, the ordinary may provide for that person's welfare or for the common good by opportune warnings or other solicitous means, and even in the case calls for it, by use of penal remedies. So if you have a loved one who's been put into jail, and he's been put into jail using a civil case, and that civil case doesn't have a seal of justice on it, and it wasn't done in due form of law, and there wasn't any evidence submitted, and he was giving which is basically an ecclesiastic crime punishment, those courts don't have any jurisdiction to give that out. So, the ecclesiastic court's going to find him not guilty. So I want to work on a piece of paper that, that tries to show that and gear it to somebody who's in jail, put down the canon laws that would apply, lay out the facts. I'll put it out, and somebody wants to try it, then we'll see what happens, right? You got somebody, a loved one in jail, what can it hurt? Okay, he may not impose penalties which are perpetual. Okay, we're not going to get you forever. The cessation of penalties, besides those who are enumerated in these other canons, all who can dispense from law, which is supported by a penalty, can also remit the penalty itself. All who can dispense from a law which is supported by a penalty, it can. Okay, so if you can enforce it, dispense the penalty, you can also remit it. Moreover, a law or precept which establishes penalty can also grant to others the power of remitting a penalty. Okay, so they can be remitted. The ordinary of the place where the offender actually is, after consulting an ordinary mention in one, unless the extraordinary circumstances, this is impossible. So these ordinaries can remit whatever has happened. They can cause the cessation of a penalty. And what else we got here? A criminal action, this is 1362. A criminal action is extinguished by prescription after 3 years, except for, so basically, a criminal action is extinguished after 3 years. If it happened more than 3 years ago, you can't be charged for it, except for offenses reserved to the congregation of the doctrine of faith, of an action arising of any offense mentioned in these particular canons that follow. Those are 5 years. That's like perjury. Offenses not punished by universal law, where a particular law has prescribed a different period of prescription. Okay? An offense not punished by universal law, where a particular law has prescribed a different period of prescription. Prescriptions run from the day of the offense was committed, or if the offense was enduring habitual, from the day it ceased. So what was this here? Oh, we got a process of acquiring title to property by reason of uninterrupted possession of Specific duration, that's a positive prescription. The limitation of time beyond which an action, debt, or crime is no longer valid or enforceable, that's a negative prescription. It sounds to me like 3 years is all they can do. Penalties for particular offenses. Offenses against religion and the unity of the church. An apostate from the faith, a heretic or schismatic, incurs excommunication without prejudice to the provisions. You're going to be excommunicated. You're a heretic. This was an interesting one. Canon 1366. Parents and those taking the place of parents who hand over their children to be baptized or brought up in a non-Catholic religion are to be punished with censure and other just penalty. Well, circumcision is considered religious law in Judaism, right? If you had your son circumcised, you just made him a Jew. You handed him over. They're going to censure you for that. Now, again, all these things can be forgiven by the church, but it's what they're using against us whenever they want to do something to us. They're using our laws, canon laws, against us. But it's a court that doesn't have any ecclesiastic jurisdiction. One who throws away the consecrated species, like that consecrated, or for a sacrilegious purpose, takes them away and keeps them, incurs excommunication. I wonder what these consecrated species are. A person who, in asserting or promising something before an ecclesiastic authority, commits perjury is to be punished with a just penalty. Before an ecclesiastic authority commits perjury is to be punished with a just penalty. Well, a false statement is perjury. That's what they're charging you with, perjury. It's an ecclesiastic offense. Only an ecclesiastic court can give a penalty. Offenses against the church authorities and freedom of the church. A person who uses physical force against a cleric religious, which is a Christian, out of contempt for the faith, or the church, or ecclesiastic authority, or the ministry, is to be punished with a just penalty. If they've used physical force against a Christian, there's a penalty. A person who in any other way does not obey a lawful command or prohibition of the apostolic see or the ordinary or superior, and after being warned persist in disobedience. That's a crime against the church. With a just penalty. They don't really say what it is, but I don't know what a just penalty is. I just know it's going to be against them. Those who hinder the freedom of the ministry or the election or the exercise of ecclesiastic power or lawful use of sacred and other ecclesiastic goods, or who intimidate either an elector or one who is elected, or one who exercises ecclesiastic power or ministry, may be punished with a just penalty. All right, they're keeping you from the lawful use of sacred or other ecclesiastic goods. Well, your goods are ecclesiastic goods that came from God. A person who profanes a sacred object, movable or immovable, is to be punished with just penalty. Consecrated species again. The usurpation of an ecclesiastic office, an offense is committed in their exercise. So the clerks of the court, whoever holds an office, so many people hold the office of notary and they have different names, right? But they're all notaries. It's one of the offices they hold. In fact, the chancellor, right, is a notary. So it's just one of the many offices they may hold, and it's an ecclesiastic office. So if you have a seal, you're holding an ecclesiastic office in the way things are set up today. And so if you usurp that ecclesiastic office, there could be a problem. So 1378, a priest who acts against a prescription and canon includes excommunication. Okay, the following incur excommunication, actually immediate interdict, or if a cleric, something else, suspension. A person who not being an ordained priest attempts to celebrate Mass. A person who, apart from a case mentioned in subsection 1, though unable to give a valid sacramental absolution, attempts to do so and hears a sacramental confession. So somebody tries to hear your confession, celebrates Mass, that's a usurpation. Well, that stuff would make sense, right? That's religious. A person who, apart from the cases mentioned in 1378, pretends to administer a sacrament is to be punished with a just penalty. Well, one of the sacraments is a sacrament of penance. And they're giving you a penance because you broke an ecclesiastic law. A person who through simony celebrates or receives a sacrament is to be punished with a suspension. And simony is like sorcery, I think, usually defined as deliberate intention of buying and selling it for temporal price such things as spiritually annexed unto spirituals. To buy and sell for temporal price such things as are spiritual or annexed unto spirituals. They're trying to trade your name all the time. Anyone who usurps an ecclesiastical office is to be punished with just penalty. Bingo. A person who gives or promises something so that someone who exercises an office in the church would unlawfully act or fail to act is to be punished with just penalty. Likewise, a person who accepts such gifts or promises. So anybody takes a bribe. A priest who in confession or on the occasion or under the pretext of a confession solicits a penitent to commit a sin against the sixth commandment, which is thou shalt not kill, of the Decalogue, which is the Ten Commandments, is to be punished according to the gravity of the offense, which suspension prohibits and deprivations. In the more serious cases, he is to be dismissed from the clerical state. So this is a judge sitting there as a priest, solicits you to commit a sin against the sixth commandment. Because thou shalt not kill isn't murder, it's kill. Right? They talk about murder here separately someplace, but, you know. Right now we're all considered deceased, decedents. And then they try to get us to self-confess to that, and that would be a sin. Because if you're a decedent or deceased, then they can do whatever they want with your body. A person who abuses ecclesiastic power or an office is to be punished according to the gravity of the act or omission, not excluding by deprivation of the office unless the penalty for that abuse is already established by law or precept. So the clerk of the court sitting in that frickin' courtroom watching what's going on. So a person who through culpable negligence, unlawful or with harm to others, performs or admits an act of ecclesiastic power, ministry, or office is to be punished with a just penalty. How come they're not standing up for your rights? To me, they're not fulfilling their ecclesiastic office. That's culpable negligence. Unlawfully and with harm to another. Yeah, they took your ass to jail. And the clerk didn't open her mouth. Oh, you clerks got bad times coming. Offense of falsehood. So anything that's a falsehood, anything that says false is an ecclesiastic offense. And only an ecclesiastic court can give a frickin' can give a penalty. A person who falsely denounces a confessor of the offense mentioned in 1387 to an ecclesiastic superior incurs late whatever. So the word confessor is derived from the Latin to confess, to profess, but is not found in writers of the classic period, having first been used by the Christians. This is a Christian word, confessor. With them it is the title of honor to designate those brave champions of the faith who have confessed Christ publicly in a time of persecution and have been punished with imprisonment, torture, exile, or labor in the mines, remaining faithful in their confession until the end of their lives. If you've confessed the Creator in front of a court and they denounce you for that, they're going to be they've already they've already have a late sentente. It's already been committed. They're going to get an interdict. Got to go back and look at interdict. It's up there higher. I didn't go through everything that's on here, but it'll explain what an interdict is. So, if you go into court and you claim to be a Christian and of the Society of Jesus under the one universal Church of Jesus Christ, and they put your ass in jail, that person who falsely denounced you, being the judge sitting up there, has got a big, big problem. He's already guilty. The sentence is already imposed. It just hasn't been enforced because you haven't told anybody yet. A person who calumoniously denounces an offense to an ecclesiastic superior or otherwise injures the good name of another can be punished with just penalty, not excluding censure. Right? So somebody makes a false claim against your good name. Boom. That's where I talked earlier. If you went there and you were found not guilty of whatever it was you were being charged with, well, then somebody brought a false claim. And there's a just penalty for them. Calumniator, to make maliciously or knowingly false statements. Okay, that's what they are. Can also be compelled to make appropriate amends. Yes, they can. They can forfeit their bond. A person who composes a false public ecclesiastic document, which is anything under a notary seal, clerk of the court, registrar, whomever, a person who composes a false public ecclesiastic document, or who changes or conceals a genuine one, or who uses a false or altered one, a person who is in an ecclesiastic matter uses some other false or altered document, a person who in a public ecclesiastic document asserts something false. They're bearing false witness against you. They don't have any evidence. They can be punished with a just penalty according to the gravity of the offense. Take it to the frickin' right court. We need to be petitioning the ecclesiastic court at the diocese. And so there's a guy who's called the judicial vicar. He's actually the judge. There's a vicar general who's the executioner, the executor. And there should be a guy there that's called the defender of the faith. Promoter of justice. Defender of the bond, promoter of justice. Offenses against special obligations. And then there's just canonist lawyers who, when the truth is shown to them, had better do the right thing, help you do a petition. Clerics or Christians who engage in trading or business contrary to the provisions of the canons are to be punished according to the gravity of the offense. Okay? Well, what's the gravity of the offense? There's no good faith in they've taken an oath, and there's no good faith in their actions. They haven't signed the contracts. Right? They're the ones who have broken the law. Okay, apart from the case mentioned, cleric having concubines, and a cleric who continues in some with external sin against the sixth commandment of the Decalogue, which causes scandal. All right. Offenses against human life and liberty. Canon 1397, one who commits murder, or who by force or by fraud abducts, imprisons, mutilates, or gravely wounds a person, is to be punished according to the gravity of the offense, with the deprivations and prohibitions mentioned in another canon. In the case of murder of one of those persons mentioned in Canon 1370, the offender is punished with penalties there prescribed. Offenses against human life and liberty. Who by force or by fraud abducts, imprisons, mutilates, or gravely wounds a person. Well, that's what's happened to your loved ones. By force and by fraud. And somebody's guilty of a penalty. A person who actually procures an abortion incurs a immediate excommunication. However, all sins can be forgiven. Just don't do it again. I think that's what they're trying to say. Everybody gets a party foul, right? You get one, but 3 strikes, you're out. Whatever that means. That law is there for some reason right now, and let's get them on number 1 first. So, anyways, I'm going to try to spend some time and put together a short video on a petition to try to get somebody out of jail. And, if you have a loved one and want to try it, by all means. We can talk about it whenever you want to. But for now, that's it from here. Talk to you all later.